So I don't want to go on a long tirade, but dates and times are really hard. And as you write more and more software, you'll better appreciate just like how true that is and how much a struggle dates and times are in software development. So, first little taste of this, we're going to see today. And I meant to do this yesterday and I just forgot. Last year, we really struggled with dates and times. And especially, this is where things get tricky, is sometimes we store dates and times in what are called UTC. Think of it as like a time zone, universal some time coordinate. I think it's probably French or something. I could be totally wrong about that. Anyway, UTC time, which is similar but not exactly the same as Greenwich Mean Time, like the time zone that runs through Greenwich, England. But we want the time in like Chicago, and so that's a different time zone. And so how things get translated is complicated, and where things get further complicated, and we ran into this with the bus app last year, 2 years ago. The server that runs our apps might not be in the same time zone as the people who use your app, right? So our server for our software engineering apps is in Ohio, and that's in the Eastern time zone. We're obviously in the Central time zone, but when you're looking for your bus and it says your bus is going to leave at 4:30, that seems weird because like it really is leaving at 3:30. And so these are all things that we have to be like concerned with. So just doing the date like this doesn't really work. So I'm going to show you the new way to do it. So I'm going to add a comment here because this is something that you might run into in future features that you add. So I had to do a bunch of research to figure this out because I didn't know how any of this worked. So when the time zone offset is absent, date only forms are interpreted as a UTC time, and date time forms are interpreted as a local time. Local time means like the time right here, like Chicago time, right? So we're in Central. I don't know if we're in Standard or Daylight. I can never keep it track. But we want the date object to reflect local time, right? Because our user is filling out a journal entry in our app. We want it to be like the time, the date they specify, we want to be like the date in their current time zone. You might think like, why does time reflect? We just only care about the date. Well, if we're getting close to midnight, like all of a sudden we start jumping around days, which is confusing. So we want it to reflect local time. So add a time of midnight. Okay. So here's how we deal with this issue. So we don't want a date only. We need the time as well. So we're going to create a new date object. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to pass a string to initialize this date object. But based on the research I did and the comment we just wrote, specifying just the date is insufficient. We also need to specify the time to make sure it's interpreted as local time and not UTC time. So we're going to do rec.body.date like we had yesterday, but then we're going to concatenate this format. And this is a standard ISO date time format. So we have a capital letter T, and then we have hour, minute, second. So that 000 is a time of, is a time of midnight. So by concatenating a time of midnight to the date the user clicked on our web page, this will be interpreted as a local time, and we won't run into this weird day where journal entries show up as tomorrow and things like that. So I meant to do that yesterday and forgot. So I'm going to make a separate commit to this just so like we're not confused with other things. I'm going to add some extra comments for at least my benefit when I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. Yeah, it's like the start of today. And we're just throwing the time in there because we want it to make sure it's like the start of today in Chicago, not like the start of today. It converts it to local time. All right, let's we're going to change the design of our homepage just a little bit. That's what we're going to do next here. We're going to add like a navigation bar and change our index page slightly. So we're going to make a couple minor modifications today. And what we're working our way up to is displaying all of the journal entries that we've entered on the homepage. Right now, there's like not much on our homepage. So let's see. Let's start with index.ejs. Let's change this around a little bit to make it a little bit more modern design. So we're going to add a div element of a class of index top bar that will allow us to style that. And then we're going to move things into that. So I'm going to cut and paste the logo here. I'm going to get rid of the width and the height though, because we can make that part of our style sheet. We don't need that included here. I'm going to cut and paste the first header. That makes sense to put in our nav bar. And then we're going to change create entry. We had that mammoth button for create entry. We're going to now move that into the nav bar. And we're going to do, we're just going to do an href instead, like an anchor tag. And so we can simply specify the link right here. We don't even need the JavaScript to basically say, oh, if they click here, go to create entry. But we're going to assign it a role of button, and this will affect how it's styled in our navigation bar. And then we give it a title of create entry. And then I'm going to delete the button because we don't need that anymore. So here's our revised index page. We've added the div element. We still have the Husky code logo. We still have our header, but now the button's going to be differently. It's actually an anchor element instead of a button element, but it'll still look pretty good. Yeah. So we can assign different roles to like anchor elements that will affect how they're styled, like in our nav bar. So this will still look like a button, even though it's technically an anchor element. An anchor, usually we use an anchor just as like a link, like within a paragraph or something. It's just a link. But here we're using it in a different way to make it look like a button. Because we're now using an anchor element instead of an actual button, we need less JavaScript code. So I love when we get to delete code. So let's go up here to assets, JavaScript, index.js. We don't need any of this anymore, right? We don't need to add an event listener for when someone clicks on the button, because now our button is actually just an anchor and it will redirect all on its own. We don't need to write code for that. So I'm going to delete all of that. That's not needed. And then finally, we can just add some styling to make our index bar look good. So assets, CSS, styles.css. We had some stuff here that was already started for us for authentication. We'll get to authentication later. But let's add some more class selectors here for, first of all, let's do the index top bar. So dot index top bar means apply the following rules to all classes with that class index top bar. Our display is going to be flex. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Our flex direction is going to be row. I know we didn't do a lot with Flexbox. There are some like extension resources on that. I was really confused about how Flexbox worked until I went through those extension resources. So if you're interested in like more details here, by all means, those resources are pretty good. So we're going to focus on organizing stuff in a row-based fashion because our nav bar is horizontal. We don't want things to wrap. We do want to justify our content with space between each of the elements. Our three elements are the icon, the title, and the create entry button. And then we want to align items in the center. In CSS, we can have a selector for an entire class like we did here for index top bar. But then we can also add additional rules for elements of that class. So by saying dot index top bar, it says, okay, all elements that have a class index top bar, but inside of that, we're going to apply the following style rule to images. So to provide some context, the div is of class index top bar. The rule we're about to write applies to all image elements inside of this div. So this is where we can specify flex shrink 0. We're going to give it a width of 100 pixels and a height of 100 pixels, which is like what we used to have in the EJS file. But now we're going to put it in a style sheet, which makes our HTML or EJS file a little bit more concise. And then the last thing we want to style is the header. Oops, not dot. So for all H1 elements in index top bar, we're going to set margin right to auto, which is going to affect how that gets aligned. I do not expect that you are Flexbox styling experts. Looking ahead to next semester, as you're adding new features and working on your app, you'll need to develop more of an understanding, but that can be like a as you go type of thing. I do recommend that when you are trying to get stuff to be styled the way you want, you actually invest the time to understand how it's working as opposed to just randomly changing things until it looks good in your web page. That investment in effort will be pay dramatic dividends. So, all right, let's fire this up and see what it looks like. Start my server. Start my client. There's what our new page looks like. So here's our image scaled down. Here's our title. And here's our create entry button. So even though this is an anchor element, see it's because of that role of button, it looks like a button. And when I click on it, it takes me to the create entry page. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. How does the button what? I don't understand what flex is. Oh, sorry. Flexbox is just a way of laying out elements on a web page. So there's different layout, different types of layouts. Like we've been doing no type of layout, which is one way you can do it. There's like grid layouts where you have a grid and you put things in different cells like a spreadsheet. Flex is a way of specifying like I'm focused on like organizing things into rows. It's called flex because the widths will shift to accommodate the elements. And you can specify like how you want that to be done. So that the flex box is just the flexibility with which we have to lay out how those three elements are in that row.